Roster cut down day has come and gone to the NFL. We've got 53-man rosters around the league. We've got a new big contract for star receiver CeeDee Lamb, big trades, all that and more coming up on today's Peacock and Williamson.
NFL analyst Brian Peacock and former NFL scout Matt Williamson bring you expert NFL analysis every day in less than 30 minutes. Get an inside look at the NFL on the field and in the front office with elite breakdowns to next-level analysis and in-depth information only for the real NFL fans. This is Peacock and Williamson, and it starts now.
Welcome to the Peacock and Williamson NFL Show. Brian Peacock alongside Matt Williamson at BD Peacock at Williamson NFL. Thanks everybody for making us your first listen on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We always love and appreciate all of our everydayers out there. And we especially appreciate it when you hit that subscribe button, hit the notification bell as well, so you know when there's a new pod on YouTube. And of course, you can subscribe everywhere you listen to this podcast. Today's episode of Peacock and Williamson is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first ticket purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and use code LOCKEDONNFL. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game time. CeeDee Lamb, Matt, $34 million per year. We've got actually some more updated exact dollar amounts from Albert Breer. So 4 years, $136 million extension. He's going to get over $39 million in 2024, $67 million over the first 2 years, all fully guaranteed, $100 million in guarantees, and $93 million over the first 3 years of this contract. So big time money for CeeDee Lamb, second only now to Justin Jefferson as far as yearly value. And he set some other records with this contract as well for signing bonus and some other things. So obviously one of the highest paid wide receivers and non-quarterbacks now in the entire NFL is CeeDee Lamb.
And I don't have a problem with it. I think that's earned. I mean, anyone that plays fantasy football realizes that he's in contention to be the first overall pick and is close to being the consensus number one wide receiver. Frankly, I think Tyreek Hill and Justin Jefferson are better football players than him, but I don't know that anyone's more important to their passing game. I mean, everything went through Lamb. He's entering the prime of his career. I also think that when he loses a step someday, his game should still translate as an old man game too, so that's a going rate. I'm not sure why it took this long, but good move. I mean, I think it had to happen.
Yeah. And, maybe the Dallas Cowboys add Dalvin Cook to the mix, it's like to add to their prime running back group. But the offense runs through CeeDee Lamb. He had 180 targets last year, something crazy too. So you got to pay the guy. And at this point, it was like he had quite a bit of leverage on the Cowboys if they want to go somewhere this year. They had to get him in, and they had to get him in enough time to get ready. So he's a factor in week one too. You start getting to this point where you're going to be affected if you're not in camp and playing preseason games, and you sign 2 days before the season starts. It's hard for you to get into mid-season shape, and it might take them a month of like extended preseason for you. So getting him in is kind of the last minute signing here to get guys that don't affect the regular season. And CeeDee Lamb did get in with a couple weeks of practice here before week one.
Yeah. And if it goes much longer, these things start to worry me, with holdouts and things of that nature. Do you think Dak gets done? I don't think it does. I think Dak goes in with a lame duck contract.
I think this is the process I have advocated for, and I think that's where we are with this. Is Micah Parsons is the next year thing, and you got to do him, and you've already decided on CeeDee Lamb, and then I think you have to make some decisions. Dak's going to make a ton of money either way.
Oh man,
it's not like you hurt yourself by money wise by not signing Dak now, but you do run the risk of losing Dak. But if it's already in the back of your mind, it's like we can't go through the same old stuff here with Dak. Then I think you let this play out. And I hope as a fan, that's how it plays out too. Because I think Dak as a free agent is very interesting next offseason.
Oh, yeah.
Especially if they have a good regular season and then get bounced early in the playoffs.
I think we said this months ago, but of the three big contracts looming, one now is done. I think you agreed with me that Dak was the least likely to return to Dallas. Like Parsons, I know he wouldn't love it, but you could franchise him and he's not going anywhere,
Right. Yeah. Parsons is the one you definitely don't let go. The most fascinating scenario actually might be if they win a Super Bowl, because now Dak's a free agent can't tag him, and so you have to go maybe crazy on signing him. So maybe it ends up costing Dallas money.
Then everybody wins, though. If you win a Super Bowl, everybody's happy.
Yeah, you see a lot of teams do that. Oh, let's just throw some money around now because we just won a Super Bowl. So unless Dak says, yeah, you know what, I want out, but he'll have some leverage for sure. And I expect Dak to have a really good season. Maybe a contract year is exactly what the Dallas Cowboys need from Dak Prescott.
Yeah, I don't think I think he's more the solution than the problem. I know some people disagree with me, but.
Can we talk about the Los Angeles Rams? Two very interesting things the Rams did. And listening to Sean McVay kind of had me cracking up. He was talking with reporters post-cutdown day and post-trade. So the Rams traded linebacker Ernest Jones to the Tennessee Titans. The Titans received Jones and a 6th rounder in 2026, not this next year. And the Rams receive that same 2026, not the upcoming draft, 5th rounder. So the Titans didn't have to give up a lot at all to get Ernest Jones, who's fought around the league as a pretty good player. And a reporter asked Sean McVay, can you take us through the thought process of you saying that trading someone like Ernest Jones makes you a better football team? And he was kind of mad and upset at the question. And it made me sound like Sean McVay does not like Ernest Jones. He doesn't trust linebackers in general, but it was like, man, we couldn't wait to get him out of here. It felt like.
So every time I hear that name, I think of about a year ago when we were laughing at the Rams defense, where it was Aaron Donald and 10 guys I never heard of. Well, that was a bit of a stretch because I thought Jones was like the next best player on the defense, at that point. We didn't know some of these rookies that played well last year as a solid, young, ascending linebacker. And I don't think, so many deals this time of year are take him off our hands for a 7th because we're going to cut him. Like, he's way better than that. I would think 5-8 teams could use him, especially with somewhat of a linebacker shortage right now, and every down guy you can trust. And I think this is Tennessee's gain, but it makes you wonder, is he hard to get along with? Is he not a good guy? Because it sure seems like the Rams allow it that way.
Maybe it's just contractual. They didn't want to pay him. Maybe they want to get paid. Something that was an odd one to me.
He might be great. I don't know.
It's like, okay, whatever. Rams don't like linebackers. And then hearing Sean McVay's explanation of it was like, it felt like they couldn't wait to get him out of the building.
Yeah, because it doesn't make you better this year.
How about Kiren Williams? We're going to talk a lot about some fantasy impact for things too. So Sean McVay said that Kiren Williams is going to be returning punts for the team. Most people's reaction to that was, oh my God, stock up to Blake Corum, backup running backs to Kiren Williams, because he's not going to carry the load because you're not going to give him all the touches he got last year, plus add punt returning to the mix. Sean McVay made it sound like, not still Kiren Williams, and then we'll mix in the other guys as needed. What do you think about this running back situation with the Rams right now?
So we had a good talk about this on Locked On Dynasty, and people thought, and I took it this way just from a fantasy perspective. Like, if I owned Williams now, I hate it. And because you're just putting this guy in harm's way. He's a valuable guy. Maybe they have nobody else, and he is considered very reliable, tough, team captain type, good in protection, will do anything for the team. And maybe he's just their best option. But I hate that he's going to take all those unnecessary hits. It's not like when Dallas would put Dion in a big game to return punts. And frankly, I don't even know that he's set up to be that good at it, because he's more of a kick returner type.
Right. The return value, unless he goes crazy and starts scoring a bunch of touchdowns for your fantasy team, it's not likely that he adds more value. And it's much more likely that they're taking away other touches that are more valuable for your fantasy team. So I'm like, I'm stock up on Blake Corum. Kiren Williams, you got to draft really high too. So maybe this does cause him to slide down, being the made back to a place where you like him a little bit better, maybe later in round 2 in your fantasy drafts. But I like me some Blake Corum stock right now.
Okay. I guess you could look at that angle that, Corum has to go up because of this. I take Williams down, even if he returns a punt for you for a touchdown. All the abuse he's going to take makes little sense to me. And this is a small thing, but it's one of the reasons people don't love to put defensive players on the punt team is you run down there or the kickoff team, like you run down there in a big special teams play, you're tired already for the first play of the first series of the game.
Yeah.
The first play of the game, first play of the series.
And it's not like they didn't draft a running back high.
Yeah.
So that already pointed to them thinking maybe this is more committee than we thought in early April.
Kind of leaning that way too.
Yeah. Next, more fantasy nuggets and impacts from roster cut down day, some of the most surprising moves, and a whole lot more as we get a little closer. We see the rosters now taking shape for 2024 next. Today's episode of Peacock and Williamson is brought to you by Game Time. Tons of tickets you can find at Game Time for all of the events you want to go to, whether it's sports, NFL games, college football games, Major League Baseball games. It's concert shows, concert theater events, comedy events as well. All of it at Game Time. And now Game Time has a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets for your favorite live events even easier. Game Time Picks filters out the fluff. So they show you only the incredible deals on seats that you want to see, so you don't waste your time searching through thousands of tickets for some really big events. And Game Time's lowest price guarantee. Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. And Game Time ticket coverage feature. Your purchase is covered with the most flexible customer service policy in the ticketing industry. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? It's Game Time. So we got tons of questions here in the mailbag, and I think this is a fascinating one from Joey Bag of Donuts. Do GMs have a gentleman's agreement about taking players away from other teams' rosters after cut down day?
I don't think so. I think it's dog eat dog, piranhas.
I think
you got a dude, right?
I think there's one big aspect to it, and it's that you don't. If you claim a guy, well, first of all, it takes a 53-man roster spot, so you have to really like a guy to claim him. And you better really like him, because I think it's very frowned upon to be stealing other people's players and then just cut that guy again later. Like that's frowned upon from agents, from the players, from other teams, from teams. And because teams really don't like it when you take one of their guys they're hoping to bring to waivers or bring through waivers back to like a practice squad situation, or maybe even sign them. So if you take a guy, you better like him and you better keep him on your roster. Because a lot of times those players burn their bridges with the original team because the team feels mad and burned that player didn't want to come back to their franchise and their own practice squad. They wanted to go sign somewhere else.
So I don't know if everyone knows this, but player X got cut yesterday at 4:00. If he's a vested veteran, if he's off his rookie deal, he's now a free agent. There's no waivers for him. He's just out there. He can field offers from anyone he wants. Pure free agent, and there's no rules if you sign them what to do with them. You can put them on your practice squad, you can do whatever you want with them. But if you claim a guy, mostly the young players, the rookie contracts, off of waivers, he has to stay on your active roster for several weeks. I think it's 3 or 4. I can't remember off the top of my head. So there's a cost. I mean, if you steal someone from another roster, you don't know them, you've never worked with them. It doesn't mean you can't, once they clear waivers, then it's kind of a free-for-all. It's a little bit like when the draft ends and you go get all your undrafted guys, So there's a lot of that going on now, too, as a practice squad. Like, if there's a running back in Detroit that they love, passes waivers, they want to put him on the practice squad, and he goes, yeah, but your backfield's so good. I worked out with Gibbs and Montgomery, and I'm never going to start there. I'm going to Dallas. You know what I mean?
Exactly. By the way, another trade.
Did you see Dalvin Cook, by the way, signed on Dallas's practice squad this morning?
I did see that there was potential that was going to happen,
happened,
and that he had been working out. And I mean, were they part of the same draft class?
Cook and Elliott were, right.
Yeah.
It's like the Kamara, Connor, Fournette, McCaffrey. Yeah. We had a long talk on it this morning on Locked On Dynasty, and still think Rico Dowdle's the guy to own there.
I don't know. I'm not owning any of them. I can tell you that much.
Along those lines, Locked On Dynasty had a question for you for the mailbag. We get back to the cuts and stuff too, but
yeah.
I answered it with Jordan Mason. Is that the clear handcuff for Christian McCaffrey injury right now?
So, yes, 100% yes.
Okay.
I have been on the Jordan Mason bandwagon. This is going into year 3 for him since his rookie camp as an undrafted free agent. So he's an interesting story too, because he was was an amazing job, I think, by the 49ers scouting staff to find him, because he was the starting running back at Georgia Tech. He was awesome. Georgia Tech just happened to get their best recruit ever in the college's history, in Jahmyr Gibbs, who ended up transferring to Alabama. And then at the time when 2022 draft,
5 years ago or so.
Okay. So basically when Jordan Mason's draft year happened, he was a backup running back. So he's like, okay, whatever, backup running back. And he kind of fell through the cracks a little bit, but he was better than that. It's just that Jahmyr Gibbs, who went top 10 the following draft, we didn't really know exactly who Jahmyr Gibbs was at that time when he was a big time recruit, but he was the backup because that's
happened to show up the wrong time.
And so he was better than he got credit for. He's a really good runner. He's got some burst and explosiveness. I thought he was a really good player. I've had him stashed to, no benefit of me on my fantasy leagues for 2 years. And now I feel like I'm not going to get him because everyone's going to draft him higher because he's the obvious handcuff now after Elijah Mitchell gets put on season-ending IR. So clearly, to me, he's the right about that, runner. I think if Christian McCaffrey gets hurt, I don't know if he's going to be an every-down guy. He actually looked good catching the ball out of the backfield, has worked on that. Pass pro maybe could keep him off the third down, juggernaut list if Christian McCaffrey was to get hurt. But I love Jordan Mason. He reminds me a lot of what you talked about with Jaylen Warren before everybody knew who he was. And clearly, Jaylen Warren was blocked, and now has ended up winning that job. It's not going to happen for Jordan Mason where he wins the job over Christian McCaffrey. But if McCaffrey gets hurt, and that's a league winner to me in Jordan Mason. I love Jordan Mason.
I said a lot of the same stuff. I didn't know the backstory with Gibbs, but I thought, man, this is a golden opportunity. This is not a fugazi, jump on him,
Yeah, it was night and day looking at him versus the other backs, too.
I thought so.
Running in the preseason. Yeah, he's a talented guy. Malik Willis got traded to the Packers.
Yeah.
That 2022 draft class now, only 2 players.
And Ritter got cut.
Ritter got cut. I mean, that
got cut. Right.
Wow, that draft class is going through some things. And, we've got third string quarterbacks. We've got.
I don't know if Kenny's going to be the backup. I mean, it's bad.
Yeah. So the only 2 that remain with the original team are the last 2, which are Skylar Thompson, who's hanging on in Miami, and Brock Purdy.
And they like Thompson. They cut White, so the last 2 are maybe the best 2. Purdy's easily the best one.
Yeah, and 7th round quarterback being QB2 is like, wow, that was a really good draft pick. A really, good job becoming a backup quarterback. And then you got Brock Purdy, who's Mr. Irrelevant, who's, in the MVP conversation last year in his first year as a starter. And the rest of the guys are basically
in trouble.
dirty. Yeah.
They're in trouble. I mean, I'm sure Ritter will end up on a practice squad. Willis gets traded for a 7th. I mean, basically just because Clifford was so bad. I think he may even been in that class or maybe he's the next one.
And so it's saying something that the Packers are like, well, at least he's good enough to be our second quarterback. So some hope there, at least for Malik Willis.
Historically bad quarterback class, but you're Purdy. I mean, looking back in history, Purdy's going to be the guy we talk about as Mr. Irrelevant,
No doubt. So next, let's finish up talking about some of the fantasy impact, some of the more surprising moves around the NFL. And of course, we've got more questions in the old weekly mailbag. Let's go to Coach, who is on the Chris Ballard, Colts GM, is overrated bandwagon. And he said, told you guys Chris Ballard is overrated. He says cute things in press conferences, but that's pretty much it. And it's referencing that the Colts cut their 7th, 6th, and one of their 5th round picks from this year's draft, and cut some draft picks, or cut some players from very recent previous drafts as well. What are your thoughts on that? And I think on a similar level, the Adam Peters, new GM in Washington, they've cut a lot of the old regime's players as well. So recent draft picks on the waiver wire today, Matt.
Yeah. Does that make you a bad GM, though? I mean, it's not great. I mean, obviously you want to hit on every draft pick, but I also think there's a lot of mistakes made sticking with a bad pick just because you picked them. You know, I mean, I think that there's something to be said for that.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's not like, the outlook for Chris Ballard's not quite as shiny as it had been a couple of years prior. The strategy, though, I don't think is that problematic. Evan Hull, a 5th round running back that you don't keep as a rookie, that's pretty bad.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of the other picks are very because Chris Ballard really leans into athleticism. So it's very.
They ended up cutting Darius Rush, who's now with the Steelers, because they drafted 3 corners that year. That was kind of dumb. I mean, like, why draft 3 corners? Yeah. Right.
But
yeah.
The idea is we got to find a good one. So if you find a good one, it's okay if one of the other ones doesn't work out. And that's kind of what I'm talking about with their strategy, which we'll see what it ends up turning out to be. But it's very boomer bust. Like Darius Rush, tall, fast corner. There was some clear problems with the way he moved in short areas to me, looseness in the hips, and it turned out not to be good. But if it turned out to be good, then maybe that's a home run. And so they're swinging for the fences with a lot of these guys. They cut Jake Witt, who was their 7th rounder from last year, who was a former basketball player. And it's like, dude, you could get a starting offensive tackle in the 7th round if he turns out. But he didn't turn out. But you took a big swing at a 7th round player. So I don't have a problem with that. And so that's kind of the idea, is they're drafting a lot of big time boomer bust players, and some of those guys are going to bust, but as long as some of them boom, I think you're fine. Now, if a lot of them bust and nobody booms, that's when you start having problems.
Well, especially if Richardson booms, obviously that's the ultimate boom bust pick. Right. But as you were saying that, I read the drafthistory.com. I mean, they've made 21 picks over the last 2 years, and not all of them high. I don't think cutting some of those dudes. I mean, there's 3 5ths this year. There was 2 7s last year. Wow, there was 7 5th round picks in the last 2 years.
Right.
Okay, two or three of those 5th round picks don't look great. Move on.
There's only 53 guys that can make it, and if there's 21 in the last 2 draft classes, that means you're not keeping very many of the veterans that were already there. If all those guys,
right. Yeah, I mean, so. I don't know. I know there's a lot of turnover on teams, and it's funny. I'm about to do a podcast with Steelers. 23 guys that the Steelers kept were not Steelers last year, but I don't know if that's insanely odd. You know what I mean? There's a lot of churning the bottom of these rosters.
I think people might overrate how easy it is for a 6th or 7th round rookie to make a roster.
Yes, and I think we've had this conversation, and I've got this from very high up people in the league, that especially this past draft, 6th and 7th round picks aren't what they used to be because everybody stays in school because of the money they get, so their 6th and 7th round picks aren't worth what they were 3-4 years ago. And it's, this hardly any juniors declared this year.
Yeah. So Ballard, I don't know. I think he's probably not as well thought of. Would he be my number 1 pick for a GM around the NFL? Maybe not. No, I do like Ballard though. And I'm okay with some of the, has he gone? It's sort of like remember Brandon Staley is like, smart guy. Maybe went for it on 4th down too much. Maybe went too far in that direction. Has Ballard gone too far in the I need height, weight, speed athletes? I only want to draft athletes. You go too far that way, and he's missing out on some of the football player element.
It's an interesting strategy, and he is going far with it. Other than Josh Downs, like everyone he's taken has been first off the bus type of guy. But to your point, your hit rate doesn't have to be as good because you hit big. And as long as you're making a lot of picks, you work the comp game, you trade down, just keep taking cracks at it.
You have to hit on some of them, and as long as your depth isn't a problem, then you're good.
Yeah.
But it's all about Anthony Richardson there.
Oh, that's the key. I mean, if he hits on him, no one's going to say he's a bad GM.
No, I mean,
Richardson
AD
can't play
Mitchell,
again.
like there's a lot of boomer bust on that roster, so it's a strategy for sure. It's not like they don't know they're doing it.
Right.
How about this? Speaking of Anthony Richardson, this is an old question from Simboski that I've wanted to ask for a couple of weeks here that I saved. Actually, it's from last week. It looks like, who will be the more lethal rushing duo, Anthony Richardson and Jonathan Taylor, or Lamar and Derrick Henry?
I'm going to go Lamar and Henry because they're so different.
I like the compliment there, and I'm so much more sure about who Lamar Jackson is that even if Henry's past his prime, I'll go with that combo, just leaning on Lamar Jackson being Lamar.
I don't think I have this down to the 10th of the yard, but I'm very, very close. That if you just look at every running back carry that Lamar has handed off in his career, they average like 5.9 yards a carry. And that's Gus Edwards and Dobbins. That's on Henry. And even if he's not in his prime, if he can get 5.9 or even over 5.5 a carry at his size and physicality, that's a lot to deal with.
I got a couple more questions here. Did you have any more big takeaways or surprises from the cut down day?
Not a lot. I mean, Nick Chubb and the other, what's his face, Chubb in Cleveland. I mean, they're on top, and Odell, and a couple things like that. I mean, but not earth shattering. Real quick on the Lamar Richardson thing, I really think there is something to running back production with super athletic quarterbacks. Like when Michael Vick was handing the ball to Dunn and Duckett, they were good players, but they were extraordinary with him.
Wow, TJ Duckett. I haven't
thought that one.
Yeah, a long time. That was a good pull.
Vince Young was the quarterback when Johnson went over 2000. Like that stuff helps.
Let's go to our guy Naz, who's been on top of the mailbag in really all summer long.
Oh, he's been great.
If you could be the fly on the wall of a GM's office for a season, which GM would it pick?
I read this and I've been thinking about it for a good half hour now, and I don't have a great answer. I mean, I think some outlier. I was trying to pick an outlier team. Like the Rams seem to look at the world a little differently. We just had a conversation about the Colts. They look at the world a little differently. Miami, speed. Like I bet they have parameters in their draft room. Like, don't bring me a 4.6 receiver. I'm not even going to look at him. You know what I mean? Like, I bet there's things like that.
I'd probably lean toward Kansas City or Baltimore. Because, a team with extended success, you want to know why. Like, what exactly is the sauce here? What's a little different? Because, we talked about boomer bust players and some teams missing on guys and, cutting draft picks and stuff. The delta in the best drafting teams and the worst drafting teams isn't that far apart.
No.
So where are you winning on the margins as a front office? That is what I'd be most interested in.
So I always used to joke along the Ravens line, because I have such respect for him, that I got to know Kevin Colbert pretty well with the Steelers, and they were the same thing. But it was always like, if the Steelers don't take this guy here, he's going to be a Raven, or vice versa. Like, I always joke that I want to see a 30 for 30 with Kevin Colbert and Ozzie Newsome on a fishing boat, having a beer or two, being like, remember when you sniped that guy for me? I know he's going to be like that. Such carbon copies of each other.
Yeah. And we separate the GM decisions and the coaching staff and who the players are. We always separate those three things. And there's so much more intertwined than we give it credit for too. Like,
oh yeah.
Does Patrick Mahomes become Patrick Mahomes if he's not with Andy Reid in Kansas City? And you see how both those teams got their quarterbacks. They took chances on really high upside quarterbacks and traded up to get them, both Baltimore and Kansas City. But they dropped them into places that were well coached. You look at the 49ers. They've hit on a lot of late round picks and mid round picks, and they've done some weird stuff too. But they keep hitting on guys because they have a great coaching staff and they keep coaching the guys up. And so I think if you look at the best GMs in the NFL history, you probably see a lot of really great coaches in the NFL history too.
Oh yeah. And interaction between the two and all those things, like the Niners are a good example. Like, they've been there long enough that there's trends. They hit on Mason and some of these undrafted backs, but the guys they trade up for don't ever. I mean, they're terrible. They're like, they do nothing.
They're the weirdest early round draft. They just cut their last 2 third round picks, Danny Gray and Cam Latu. And at the time, I'm like, Cam Latu, what is the best tight end class we've seen in a decade? And you're drafting like the 20th best one in the 3rd round. Like, what are you even doing? You know,
that
and
was
they
a
cut
weird
him.
class.
Well, they found a starter in the 6th round or 5th round, and you know they keep finding these guys that are big time players in the mid rounds, even though they're lighting 3 first-round picks on fire for a quarterback. So, but they eventually find guys that are good and coach them up, and so I think that's a huge key too, and trusting that, and the GM finding the right players for that coach.
Last thing I have on it though is I heard a fantasy podcast talking about Xavier Worthy, and everyone's hoping, boy, if Xavier Worthy hits, he'll be like a Deshaun Jackson. Well, he went to Andy Reid, who coached Deshaun Jackson with the Eagles. You know, like, hey, like you remember where he landed? You know,
so if he doesn't turn out good, it might be on him.
Yeah, I mean, like I'm sure Andy Reid said, I can do what I did with Deshaun with Worthy. You know what I mean? Like, I know how to make that guy good.
If Worthy's a really good test case, because if Worthy goes to another bad team, bad organization with a bad quarterback,
he's just running rinse sprints out there.
Right.
Yeah. And speaking of the Eagles, that's the thing I want to mention too. I forget who brought this to my attention, but if you look at their last 4, 5, 6 drafts, those throwaway picks that we talk about, those 6th, 7th rounders, they take outliers. They just take swings at the fences. Johnny Wilson's a 6'6". Is he a receiver? Is he a tight end? Weird guys. I mean, Jordan Mailata, you know, like guys like that. They just take outliers. Maybe it's small, but he runs a 4.1. You know what I mean? Like weird dudes. I don't know what position he plays.
That's a great example of that. You know, so you might draft Jordan Mailata in the 7th round. You might draft Jake Witt and you end up cutting him before his 2nd.
Exactly. Exact same conversation. But if you hit on Mailata, especially with that O-line coach, that's one of the best picks in the last 10 years.
Find the right outliers to bet on too is easy to say, but hard to do.
But they look for outliers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Howie Roseman. Howie Roseman, that's another GM, like just seeing how he deals with things.
I'd love to be
where he could try to find where his advantages are, and he makes a lot of moves. So that'd be a really good one.
That might be
maybe even number 1, just because of how many moves he makes.
Yep, active.
Thanks, everybody, for your questions for this week's mailbag. Keep them coming for next week and all season long at BD Peacock, at Williamson NFL. You can also drop a question in the YouTube comments. Make sure you subscribe while you're there. Thanks for making us your first listen here on the Locked On Podcast Network. For your second listen, check out any of the 200 pods on the network. Your team is covered daily. And Locked On Fantasy Football. Get ready for those fantasy drafts. Locked On Dynasty. Matt Williamson making an appearance this week. So, as he always does. So, tons to find on the Locked On Podcast Network. Matt and I back tomorrow with Aaron Schatz. We're talking DVOA projections. Fantastic conversation. Tune in tomorrow right here, Peacock and Williamson.